Hotep, I'm Dr. Gloria Lattimore Peace, host and producer of OmniU Presents, the H3O Art of Life show. The title of this show is Brothers at Work, Alpha Phi Alpha. Many times when you're going through the street, you'll see these signs, construction signs up, it'll say men at work, you know, and you'll know some heavy duty work is going on because they have the traffic all blocked off and rerouted. So I brought in some brothers who are all part of the same organization, who do some interesting work, and we're not talking about their day jobs. We're talking about the volunteer work that they do in our community, and I am very happy to introduce the brothers from the Alpha Phi Alpha, beginning with the president. Very happy to greet you, Michael Williams.
Why, thank you.
And then the vice president, and I've forgotten your first name, but I know
Wardell.
the last name is Glass,
Yes.
because you're smooth. And then Lovise Jiles, who is a member who, they have a name for new members, but I object to it, so I won't use it. I'm just saying that to kind of break the ice here. But Wardell, you're the vice president of the organization. Usually we ask the president to speak first. But you had an interesting story that I wanted you to get out, and I know the president has some stories as well, but his stories are historical stories. Let me hear your story about this organization.
Mine has a slight historical twist to it as well.
All right.
And that is how fraternities and sororities, those black Greek letter fraternities and sororities, came by using the Greek alphabet as part of their name. And the story is a real simple one. It was as we were forming in our early years, organizing, if you will, that one of the ways we wanted to secure our identities and hide them from those who were not knowledgeable of what we were attempting to do, we used the Greek alphabet to designate not only the names of the fraternities and sororities, but also the chapters within. So as an example, Alpha Phi Alpha, Fraternity Incorporated, first of all, servants of all, we shall transcend all, founded on December 4th, 1906 at Ithaca, New York, right? We represent the 288th House of Alpha, and that being Theta Mu Lambda chapter, housed in the southern suburbs of Chicago.
All right. Thank you very much. You gave a good account of yourself. I'm skipping over the president again because he's going to have a longer time to talk. I want to ask Lovise Jiles why he decided to join, and the president is going to answer the question about why you have the membership qualifications you have. But, you know, they allowed you to join, so tell me why you decided to seek membership.
Sure thing. So I'm pretty transparent. I did seek membership way back when as an undergrad, and you mentioned membership requirements. Well, at that particular point in time, I did not meet the membership requirements to join the fraternity. And, you know, from that point on, you know, kind of life happened. You know, I graduated, got married, had kids, but it was always something that, you know, I was going to get back to doing. And I finally got to a point in my life where, you know, from a family standpoint, my daughters were at a certain age, and financially and things of that nature, I was at a point where I thought that, you know, I could make a good contribution to the fraternity. And, you know, I thought that I did meet the requirements at the time. And so I sought out membership. And that's really my story. It was definitely something that, even from that time that I could not do it, it was never a time that I wasn't going to do it. It was just a matter of when.
All right. Now, let's have the president tell us why this organization exists, what its mission is, and about these membership qualifications.
Okay, let's start with the mission.
All right.
Alpha Phi Alpha, develop leaders, promote education, and provide advocacy and service to the communities. That's our mission statement. What does that mission statement mean? Well, To become a member of Alpha Phi Alpha, you have to meet certain educational requirements. As a college young man, you have to have a certain grade point, carry a certain number of hours. As an alumni brother, you had to, again, meet certain qualities, have a degree. What does it mean by promoting education and then developing leadership? Well, Alpha Phi Alpha develop leaders, and you do it with the programs that we have with the young men. We do it with the programs we have with members in Alpha Phi Alpha. Alpha Phi Alpha develop leaders, and to be a member of Alpha Phi Alpha, you are in fact a leader, and it's expected you will take on leadership qualities and a leadership role not only within the fraternity but within your own community. And it's the last part about providing advocacy and service to the community. That's what we do. And when we talk about some of the programs from the past, we can see where Alpha Phi Alpha has done that. We have a mentoring program that we work with. This is called Leaders for Tomorrow. And with this mentoring program is actually something that we started back in 1919 with the Go to College, Go to High School, Go to College program. Also part of the community outreach, we came up with a slogan way back in the 1930s that a voteless people is a hopeless people. So those are things that we're doing. We could be more specific about what programs we're involved in.
You started out in Ithaca, New York?
Yes.
Okay, who were the movers and shakers that got it started?
Well, Alpha Phi Alpha, as Brother Glass just stated, was formed in 1906, but it didn't originally start out as a fraternity. Originally, the fraternity members started out as a study group. And then as time went on, the study group realized that maybe they needed to do a little bit more. And then certain members of the study group said that the next logical move would be to form a fraternity. So 7 men decided that that would be the best thing to do, and they came up with the idea that we wanted to have a fraternity. Now, what happens when you form a fraternity? Well, fraternity provides a way for members to help one another. In that time when they were in Ithaca, New York, at Cornell University, well, it was some places around Ithaca, New York was pretty hostile. And so as a black community, you needed to band together. You needed to get together, share testing information, share information about certain professors. And so they banded together to make this happen and make it work for them.
I think it's interesting because you don't really think about black people in college in 1906. Or, you really, when you try to get your mind wrapped around that, you just think that this is sort of a more recent 20th century type phenomena, and not way back in the early 1900s. That's just interesting to know that there were black men in college who were seeking higher education, who were getting degrees, who were farsighted enough to want to do something more than just succeed themselves, because they could certainly have just committed themselves to getting the degree and going to work. But they decided that they wanted to do some good in the community, but then they had to get a banner, a protective banner, a shield, as it were, so that they would be able to do it with less harassment. I'm sure they did experience some.
Yes. When you talk about blacks at the turn of the century going to college, there were other blacks in college, but they felt that if they had the opportunity, they wanted to reach back and help others along. Dr. Du Bois talks about a talented tenth. And when you talk about the formation of Alpha Phi Alpha, you truly talk about the formation of this talented tenth, and to whom much is given, much is required. So that's why as early as 1919, members of Alpha Phi Alpha came up with the slogan, go to high school, go to college. It wasn't meant for everyone, but those who could, that was a responsibility that you should try to do.
I want you to explain to me what that coat of arms says.
In the coat of arms, with Alpha Phi Alpha, there's a coat of arms and there's a shield. And particularly, not so much the coat of arms, but I like to talk about the shield that you see on our official documents. On the shield, you see a torch, and the torch represents knowledge. You see 7 stars on the torch, and the 7 stars represent the 7 jewels. Also on the torch, you see an object that has an axe with wood wrapped around the axe. And I think the correct pronunciation for that is called a fasces, like the faces part,
Fascia.
fasces, and that represents strength, but it's strength through unity, and that's part of it. And also you see on the shield a dove, which represents peace. So again, that's what our fraternity stands for.
All right.
Okay.
Okay.
But you know, one of the things as we were talking just prior to the show, you were asking me about what happened in the past, and I made a comment, and you challenged me on it. And that comment was, I believe that a lot of what we see as far as the civil rights movement, the modern civil rights movements, would have never happened without Alpha Phi Alpha. You said that was a mighty bold statement.
Yes, go
And,
right
and
ahead.
I'd like the opportunity to
Support
talk about that.
Support that bold statement.
The brother in particularly I'm thinking about, his name was Charles Hamilton Houston. This was a young man that eventually wound up going to Howard Law School. When he got to Howard Law School, he decided there were some changes that had to be made. For instance, he brought in the mock trial. But also, as he was bringing in the mock trial and training African Americans to become trial lawyers and become lawyers, he came up with the notion that there was a way to destroy Jim Crow. And so what he did as an attorney, he started to thinking about the process. And instead of having a battle, why don't you wage a campaign to break down and get rid of Jim Crow? As you know, Jim Crow became legal in 1896 with the Plessy versus Ferguson decision. Well, the question was, how do we reverse Plessy versus Ferguson? And so this is what he started out the campaign. And so his strategy was, why don't we go after cases that we could win? And he started off with cases like law school. You know, when a black man was in law school and he was being segregated, well, you could bring that before a court and say, is that legal? In the law school, the law says you have to provide separate but equal facilities. Well, we know it was financially impossible for certain universities to do that. So what do? It's a law school, this is the law, you know the law. He was winning cases like that. For his students that he was training for this, Thurgood Marshall, Bedford v. Lawson, these were also attorneys that he was trained to go after breaking down Jim Crow. And as the process continued, he was winning case after case to the point that just before Brown versus Board of Ed, he died, but his student, Thurgood Marshall, was able to argue this case. But this was based on the framework that he established in the 30s and worked it all the way up to that 1954 decision. That's one part of it. And then the other part, when I talk about Alpha Phi Alpha and the civil rights movements, I think of Dr. King. Who could not, forget, Dr. King and what he did for the civil rights movement? I remember reading in my history book about the 1956 convention where Dr. King was down on funds. You know, the boycott was starting. He was starting to get active, and he needed money to help survive this boycott, the bus boycott, which has just started. And it was Alpha Phi Alpha went in their pocket to support him. So again, the things that Dr. King did, you could look at the brother from Adam Clayton Powell, again, another Alpha, and the things that was done in the civil rights movement.
You had Adam Clayton Powell?
Yes, ma'am.
I am duly impressed.
He's another Alpha. Paul Robeson, super advocate.
Oh, I am really
another
impressed.
Alpha. Again, these are strong advocates dealing with the civil rights movement and civil rights.
Call the roll. They didn't have to all do civil rights.
No, but you mentioned civil rights at the beginning. That's why I wanted to talk about that. You said, give me some proof.
Right.
How's that?
I just wanted you to support your argument. I didn't doubt that you would make, frivolous statements. I didn't expect that to come from an Alpha.
No.
Somebody else, not you. But, you have illustrious people like that, Paul Robeson, Adam Clayton Powell. That's amazing, which means that, that gives the organization credibility beyond just the work that it did, but to have the foresight to see that you needed to go after, not just wait until times change, but to go after these unjust laws and to do something about changing the condition of our people, that's amazing. It's wonderful. And to go at it in the way of training lawyers with the mock trial, you know, so that they could get practice at how to try cases in courtrooms. And we're still benefiting from that behavior today. So it's not just, you know, the civil rights, that's human rights that we talk about defending now. So that's so excellent. Tell me how big is this organization? Where are you? How many? You've got your chapter in the south suburbs of Chicago. What other? Tell me the geography
Alpha
of this
Alpha
thing.
is international. We're in Liberia. In fact, I think it was just a couple years. It was recharted in Liberia. We're in London, England. It's international. It's in the Bahamas. So Alpha Canada. In fact, the 5th chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha was founded in Toronto. So it's an international organization.
Okay, how big? 100 people?
There have been, over the years, in excess of 100,000 men that have walked the path of being a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated.
100,000?
Over.
Wait a minute. In what period of time? From 1900 till
1906 to
1906 to the present. In 100 years, you've had 100,000
Over
people?
100,000.
Over 100,000 people
Yes.
become members.
Yes.
What are the membership qualifications?
Well, to become a member, well, in fact, since we have a new guy, and I'm going to use the term, it's called a neophyte. Neo meaning new, fight, you know, acolyte. So we're going to ask our neophyte, who's a new member to our fraternity, to talk about what were the requirements, because you just did it.
Right. So we touched on it a little bit earlier. So the number one requirement is definitely having a college degree. So, you know, first things first, that we got to get that out of the way. But, you know,
You're an
secondly-
alumni chapter, though.
Yes,
Correct.
I am.
Because you do have chapters where the people are still in college, they don't yet have a degree.
Right.
So in your case, it's because you're an alumni chapter.
And I'll talk about the college, because I became a member while I was still in college.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
all right, so let's
Yeah,
do
so
the
I would be alumni. But secondly, I think the other piece of it is that leadership component. You know, there are, you know, a series of sessions where you talk to existing brothers and, you know, kind of talk about your background, where you've come from, what you've done. And, you know, quite frankly, you know, you definitely have to meet certain qualifications as it stands in terms of leadership. Another big component is, you know, what have you done, you know, from a community standpoint, you know, in the past, you know, that kind of gives way to, you know, what you've done versus what you will do and what you can do with the fraternity. So I think those are kind of the three key areas that they look at.
And the skill set. What
Right.
skill set do you bring to the table?
Right.
What skill set do you bring to the table?
So, you know, number one, I think from a leader standpoint, I do think I have certain attributes as an effective leader. You know, and I think that I've kind of been through quite a few things in life that would be beneficial to share with young men as they're actually coming up in age. So I think that's really what I bring to the table.
You know what else I think? It's not only that you have certain kinds of skills and a certain background history, personal history, but it's also whether or not you can convey that. Because young people are not moved by people just because they've been here and they did that and all of that kind of stuff. If you can't relate, if you can't get across, if you can't connect, then you may as well be in a room talking to yourself.
Absolutely.
So, you know, does having children of your own help you in that way, or what do you think?
I definitely think so. I mean, the group of guys that we deal with in particular with Leaders for Tomorrow are teenage guys. So it's definitely a benefit for me to have three teenage girls. You know, they definitely keep me abreast of what's going on out here in the world. So I definitely have that direct plug-in to, you know, what these guys are actually thinking. So it definitely helps out.
Okay.
You know, Brother Jiles is being a little bit modest. Upon joining the fraternity, almost immediately, he was putting his skill set to work. For instance, being an older guy, sometimes I might be a little bit technology challenged, but Brother Jiles has come in and said, well, listen, Brother Williams, I think if you do these things, we could move the fraternity, the chapter along a lot faster with certain technology advancements. So he came right in, hit the ground with this skill set, and it was teaching the old guys like myself, okay, this is what we need to do, this is the adjustments we had to make. And then, not only that, but one of the things we need to talk about at some point is a mentoring program that our chapter do. We'll maybe talk about our chapter activities, but he attended one of those sessions with our young men. And again, utilizing the skill set he brought to the table to work with these young men and to relate and connect with them.
Okay.
And I think as well, one of the other things as part of being the way been introduced into Alpha Phi Alpha, one of the goals, especially in an alumni setting, is to help young men all the way through those that have graduated from college to kind of find a place, if you will, where they can share in an understanding of what it takes to get into the mainstream of business or to get into the mainstream of their chosen profession that they've studied so hard for during their collegiate years.
Mm-hmm.
As a national program, we have programs like that. One of the programs is College to Corporate, C2C, College to Corporate. And with that program, we promote working with men coming out of graduating from college, getting them into a corporate setting, even to the point that we help provide ties or suits for these young men so that they will be able to, make the adjustment.
Right, right. So that when they appear for an interview or something, they look like they're serious
Absolutely.
about a career.
Even when we have our conventions, the young men, everyone's required to wear shirts and ties and jackets. It's an appearance. But you were asking me about membership. As a college brother, now, I've been a member of this fraternity for over 40 years.
Really?
So, and these two gentlemen were
Well, what are you
both.
doing in the alumni chapter?
That's a good thing. But let's talk about what happened as a college.
All right.
In college, I became a member at Northern Illinois University. That was called
DeKalb.
Epsilon in DeKalb, Epsilon Phi chapter. That chapter was started in 1964 in DeKalb. To become a member of the chapter, you had to demonstrate skills within the community. You had to have some kind of leadership skills. In college, I was involved with leadership positions in various organizations. So everyone's coming in with a skill set. You had to maintain a certain grade point. Even to this day, if a college chapter, the members have a aggregate grade point that falls below a certain level, that college is put on probation. As standards that's required, even to this day. We have standards that have to be maintained. If you're going to be a member of the fraternity, you have to have a certain grade point. You don't have the grade point, you're not allowed to wear the colors. So again, we're real serious about that.
Right. And to assist the college chapters and brothers becoming familiar with the fraternity, we also, from an alumni standpoint, act as advisors to colleges in our area. We're assigned to do so by the national office.
What about tutoring? You got some people, you about to put on probation or something because the grade point average has slipped. Somebody's got to rescue.
And that's part of what, going almost back to the original thought, the people that's members of the fraternity reaching back and helping one another, and that occurs. But we keep dancing around, we keep mentioning our mentoring program. Let me talk about that very specifically. There's several national programs every chapter, Alpha Phi Alpha, should be participating in. One of those national programs is called, just like it was in 1919, go to high school, go to college. Well, for our chapter, we call it Leaders for Tomorrow. In fact, this past Saturday, we just had an awards banquet recognizing those young men that participated in this Leaders for Tomorrow program. But what is Leaders for Tomorrow? Well, the program is held on Saturdays. It's a 3-hour program from 9 to 12. The first hour from 9 to 10, we go over math type problems, SAT, ACT type math problems. The instructor There's a retired high school teacher and a current math teacher at a college. He will put a math problem on the board. In this room, about 25 young men have to figure out how to solve this problem, but not just solve it, but also explain how they got there. And so other people with the procedure, and so oftentimes he would solve the problem, but also go at it a different way, just to work with the way they're thinking. The second hour, from 10 to 11, we do a literature program. This year, we were reading the autobiography of Malcolm X and going through it. In previous years, we've read Kevin Powell's book, The Black Man's Handbook, and the year before that, Hill Harper's book, Letters to a Young Brother. And during this session, we'll get into the open discussions. The students will have assignments to read and have to be prepared when they come back to the session and be engaged in discussion. And oftentimes, I would lead the discussion, or some other brother would lead the discussion, and we could tell whether or not you read your assignment or not, and we'll work with them. And then the last hour was the hour we will bring in someone to do a particular topic. Like, for instance, there's a number of members in our chapters are businessmen, they're entrepreneurs. They did a miniature Shark Tank where the students had to come up, work in groups, and come up with an idea. And they had to talk about how they were going to fund it, what the product was, and they had to sell it to a committee of brothers that are entrepreneurs, like a Shark Tank. Another section dealt with engineers. There's a number of engineers in the chapter. Like last year, I loved it. The assignment was they were to take a brick. They were broken up into teams of 4. They would have a brick that was about this big, but it was pretty heavy. And the assignment was they had to build a structure using only popsicle sticks and tape. Who could build the structure the highest that could hold the brick for at least a minute. And so it was things like that. But before they were able to build the structure, they were given the concepts, the engineering concepts. How do you put it together? How do you have a load? How do you manage the weight? That sort of thing. Another section we would have one dealing with law enforcement. Like, for instance, and again in the chapter, there's members that are from the state police, Chicago police, sheriff police, some of the local municipalities. Also at that time was a brother that was a chief of police in one of the villages. Well, the question that was asked to the young men, how do you handle it when you stop by police? What do you say to the police and the police say to you, may I search your car? Those are things that the police as a panel would talk to the kids about. And I remember last year in particular, there was an incident right after the Trayvon Martin incident. We had this police panel. It was just the way it was scheduled, but it was very, very interesting in the discussion that came up. And the parents had a lot of great questions as well. Along with those different things, we also have a mock trial. For years, we've had a relationship with John Marshall Law School, where the students will actually go to John Marshall and participate in a mock trial, pretty much so like the earlier guys did at Howard with Charles Hamilton Houston.
Are they participating as lawyers or as people who are defendants?
What you do with the mock trial, you take sides. You have a defense and then you have a prosecution. Each side, you have several parts in the trial. Like, for instance, you have to give opening statements. You have to do cross-examinations. Someone has to be a witness. You have to do closing arguments. You have to know how to raise an objection.
So you're operating as a lawyer and not as a defendant in the case?
That is correct.
Excellent.
So we're training them, how do you present as a lawyer? And those are some of the things, as well as our service learning projects.
I want to ask you, when do you introduce social skills? Because young men need to know how to behave like young men, and especially in relationship to young ladies, because there are some young men that I'm sure Mr. Jiles would not allow to come anywhere near any daughter of his, and not because they are necessarily offensive. It's just that no one has told them how to conduct themselves in the company of ladies, or how to conduct themselves in the company of other guys, that when they're in not in an informal situation, when they're in a more formal situation, So where's the social skills part? Because young men don't just have those.
Well, as it relates to relationships, let's start there
Okay.
We one of our national programs is called Project Alpha, and here in the state of Illinois, Project Alpha is put on by a variety of chapters throughout the state, typically about the first Saturday in November. And what Project Alpha is about dealing in male-female relationships. We hosted, about a year ago, we hosted Project Alpha through our chapter from Thornton Township High School, my alma mater. And during that, we had a video presentation for about 150 to 175 young men, not just isolated to the south suburbs of Chicago, but across the Chicago metropolitan area. We had young men coming down from the Proviso East to schools, into the inner city schools, as well as those in the south suburbs that are virtually in at-risk type communities. Part of the presentation was that we have a fraternity brother who has put out a series of film and books relating to showing them how to behavioral characteristics, good, bad, and pretty much middle of the road when it comes to relationships with females and also among other young men.
You know, when we talk about Project Alpha, and Project Alpha is a Chicagoland initiative, and the focus is male responsibility. What do you do if this young lady winds up pregnant? How do you avoid it? What shouldn't you be doing? And this is part of it. And this is done in partnership with March of Dimes. So it's a big national program. And this whole concept about Project Alpha was an initiative that was first started here in Chicago in the 1980s, but another chapter here in the Chicagoland area. So
where do you get money to finance these projects?
Oftentimes the money comes from fundraisers, like for our Leaders for Tomorrow program. Parents actually bought tickets to help support it. When we did Project Alpha, we wrote for and received a grant from the March of Dimes to help us to fund this. But we also reached out to other organizations. There's members of our chapters that belong to other organizations, and we asked for donations, and that's how we got some monies in. But with Project Alpha, it's strictly out of our pocket. But the other thing you asked about was about how do young men treat young ladies. Well, that's one aspect of it, dealing with male responsibility, such as Project Alpha, and again, it's going to be this year. But also, about 3 weeks ago, we held an etiquette class. Now, when they were bringing up the idea about hosting an etiquette class, I kind of smiled, said, how are you going to talk 2 hours about etiquette? And actually, it went longer than 2 hours because the presenter was so phenomenal in the things you had to learn about etiquette. Like, for instance, every piece of silverware, you know, is there for a reason, and there's a certain style. You know, if it's a round soup spoon, you know you're going to get cream soup. If it's the soup spoon was pointed, you know, little things like that. About pulling the chair out for the young ladies, about how the server is going to approach from which side. You know, how they
about not talking with your mouth full of food.
Simple, basic things like that. You know, the proper utensils, the proper etiquette. You know, how do you signal when you're finished? How to place your napkin? Because some kids think, well, don't you put your napkin down your neck? No, it goes in your lap. Well, how do you keep the food? It's how you lean over when you eat. It's just little simple things. So it's etiquette class. And that particular etiquette class, it was held at a church, and there was several female, you know, teenagers that was there, female teenagers that was there as well. Should have had some
parents there too.
Oh yeah, the parents were there observing because
they should have been participating.
Parents, students. Everyone was, you know, thrilled about the conversation about etiquette and all the different aspects of it. So that was a phenomenal class. A phenomenal class.
So you're real thrilled about this organization. Now tell me how you got in it, since you're not an alumni.
When I'm a product of the 1960s, you know, product of that said loud and black and I'm proud.
Okay.
So I went to college at Northern Illinois University, a white college, but it was about 1,000 blacks on campus. So we had some kind of standing. In the dorm, the dorm I lived in, there was members of Alpha Phi Alpha. Now, me being that guy, my undergrad degree, my major was history, and my minor was African American studies. So immediately I was like, how do black men become a Greek? So, I was kind of turned off by that whole concept of being black and Greek. But then as you start to meet the guys and talk about what's going on, then all of a sudden you realize, hey, they're more than just guys that got letters on their chest and partying. They had to do community service projects there as members of the fraternity while in college. I remember one of the service projects we did. It was like one of the grocery stores had a real problem of grocery carts being all over the place. And as a chapter, we took it upon ourselves to collect the grocery carts to take it back to the grocery store, and different things like that within the community. You go help out at different, with different organizations with younger kids. So as a college brother, we were engaged in helping and doing things on campus. Also, as an alpha, you had that stigma, being the smart guys. So we had to maintain our grade point and make sure we were the smart guys in school. So it was something you wanted to do. Then once I found out what they did, and then I found out about the civil rights history, Dr. King, Brooks, Edward Brooks, Julian Bond, all these guys that are alphas that was involved in politics and doing in the civil rights movement. It was like, oh, I understand now. And that's why it became more palatable to join a Greek letter organization.
But now you joined it as an undergrad,
Mm-hmm.
but you're in a grad chapter, and that's what I'm trying to get to work for me. Because at what point do you become, when you graduated, you became an alumni.
Mm-hmm.
But you were first in an undergrad chapter.
Mm-hmm.
So you left that chapter?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you do that?
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely. And so
Okay.
what happens?
But that's where all your boys are.
Yes, that's a good point. What happens is that once you graduate, you go on with life. You go into your different fields. You go in your different directions. I think it's unique. I remember having a similar conversation with a white gentleman once, and we were talking about fraternities and sororities, and the difference between the black fraternities and the white fraternities. One was, as a white fraternity, when you're in a fraternity in college, you're in the fraternity in college. But when you join like a black fraternity, you're in the fraternity for life. And that's what it is.
Oh,
so
I see.
once you leave college, once you graduate from college, it's expected that you join up
Because you
with
can't
alumni.
function with the one that's back there at the school.
No.
You're not going back to Northern.
It's time to move on to
Right,
a new
it's time to
experience.
move on, and there's an
My
alum.
only role with Northern is to be an advisor, to talk with the guys, advise the guys, but it's their college and we're alumni. We're doing different things at different levels. There's different levels of expectations.
Well, now, my understanding of organizations is you have a president and you have a vice president, and the vice president's job is to take the place of the president when the president isn't there.
Mhm.
But the vice president and the president are both here. So what is your function? Because it certainly can't be to stand in for him because he's here.
That was a trick question.
I know, and I love it. My answer is this, is that while it is my obligation to the Brothers of Theta Mu Lambda chapter to operate as backup, if you will, for the president in his absence, it's also my role and responsibility to deal in membership, as well as I have the fortune of sitting on the National Investment Committee for Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. And last but not least, I'm the chairperson for our annual Black and Gold Scholarship Gala. So part of in addition to supporting the president when he's absent or unable to conduct meetings or conduct the business of the chapter, I have other roles in participating affairs of the chapter, and we also have a foundation. And through this foundation, we support scholastic endeavors of high school students going into college, as well as some of the other things like the Boy Scouts of America, etc.
Well, then wait a minute. Hold up. Mm-hmm. If he's doing all that, what are you doing?
let me back up just a little bit. One of the things I think is great by having a great vice president, just like we talked about Charles Hamilton Houston, coming up with a long-term plan. Mm-hmm. I think that any successful organization, you should be thinking about succession. What happens when that person leaves office? Who comes in? And I think with Brother Glass working with me on so many projects, mm-hmm. that succession is already there. Mm-hmm. The transition to be minimal mm-hmm. once my term of office is up.
But I want to know what you're doing now.
What do I do
We're
now?
not transitioning. You in this office. What are you doing?
Well, I guess as president, you're kind of ex officio. So okay. Within our fraternity, there's education director. So I work very closely with them, with the young men in the mentoring program. Mm-hmm. We work with the Black and Gold fundraiser. And in fact, this Saturday when we did the Leaders for Tomorrow program, the charitable foundation, we gave away, this year, we've given away $7,000 in scholarship funds. And now we've just found we got another $3,000 available to give away this year. But I work on that committee as well. So I'm also executive board member of the foundation, as well as, again, ex officio on some of the other committees. So we have elections committees, you have the March of Dimes, so again, where we partner up with in the March of Dimes with Project Alpha, as well as the March of Dime Walk. I work with, who else did I do besides the March of Dimes, Project Alpha, Leaders for Tomorrow. We have a retreat coming up. There's a retreat committee. What do you do? How do we make sure the thoughts that we want to be carried on is carried on?
And you participate in the Chicago.
I'm also a part of a committee. It's called CAT, the Chicago Area Alumni Chapters. So I meet with other presidents of other alumni chapters of Alpha Phi Alpha, and we get together to talk about programs. And our three major programs we get together with. One program is that you'll see us out the Bud Billiken Parade. So it's not just the Chicago chapter, it's the Chicago area chapters joining in with the Chicago chapter with the Bud Billiken Parade. In addition to Bud Billiken Parade, we do Project Alpha. Remember I talked about that as being a citywide initiative, and the young men come from all over. And then the last thing, we do a Founders Day, and we are set on that committee as well. And I guess then the last thing is that we do our original project called the Leadership Development Institute, and this is where young men come in from 11 different states to participate in the educational program. So I kind of do have a little bit of
you're not just a pretty face. You're not just a figurehead.
No,
you're not just sitting there with a title. You actually have some real function. Well then, Mr. Jiles, what is your role? What are you?
He's a new guy now, so
I'm a new guy.
You're the new kid on the block, but surely you have some responsibilities.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And you know what? I tell you one thing. It's funny. As I was going through the membership process, you heard something that was said quite often. They said, it's harder to be an alpha than to become an alpha, and you really don't understand what that means until you become an alpha. But while these gentlemen are in elected positions within our chapter, there are a host of committees and things of that nature that they talked about that, all of us at a chapter level take part in one form or another. So like he mentioned the retreat committee, I'm working on the retreat committee. The technology committee, I'm working on the technology committee as well. The Boy Scouts initiative, I serve breakfast, for the Boy Scouts. So there's a ton of things that we're doing that, you may not see in the forefront, but there's a host of committees and different events that we all take part in. And, as a new guy, while I'm not in an elected capacity, I'm able to participate and provide, time in all of these different initiatives. And that was the big thing for me, even you know, before I joined the fraternity, is I really was at a space where I wanted to start giving back, but I wanted some structure around doing it, and so it was kind of, you know, two pronged for me. One, I always wanted to be an alpha anyway. But when you take a look at what they're actually doing, that was that structured, you know, the structured way that I could actually give my time and giving back. And one thing that really struck me as I was going through the membership process, and I was talking to the brothers about it earlier, was I had no idea of the history that was involved with the fraternity. I mean, you were, you know, surprised just to hit a few things today. Well, I learned even more than that going through the process, and I had no idea, you know, about it. And so, you know, even more today, you know, I'm happy that I made the commitment to stick it through, because it's work to be done, and you know, we are definitely taking some initiative and spearheading getting it done.
So you're not just a pretty face in the organization either. Everybody in the organization has to. This organization is not just an organization for prestige purposes. You don't become a member and then walk around wearing these jackets with these coats of arms and looking down on people, but you actually have to put your nose to the grindstone.
Alpha Phi Alpha develop leaders,
Okay.
and you're expected to be a leader.
Okay.
That's an expectation.
I love that. I really do. I think that the question I'm going to ask you might be a little sensitive, but I do know that there are other fraternities. What is your relationship? You know, do fraternities ever cooperate with each other on any level to achieve goals that are bigger than?
Yeah.
It's great.
Okay,
Go
all
ahead.
right.
I love it.
Well, that was okay. That's not a bad question.
No, it's a very great question.
Is it?
Great
Awesome.
question.
Especially
There-
given this last weekend.
Right. There's an organization that most all Black Greek letter organizations, fraternities and sororities, participate in nationwide as well as locally. It's called the Panhellenic Council. Here in Chicago, there is the Chicagoland area, there is a National Panhellenic Council for us, where we are members of among from a fraternity standpoint, Omega Psi Phi, Kappa
Alpha Psi.
Kappa Alpha Psi, thank you, and Iota Phi Omega.
Nope.
Nope, I always get it wrong.
It's the nine Black Greek
Right.
organizations. We
Okay.
work together,
Okay.
and we're forming what you call a Pan-Atlantic Council. And this past weekend, not this weekend, the weekend before,
Right.
was a whole Pan-Atlantic weekend where all 9 Black Greek letter organizations got together, peace walk, a rally at Diet School, a big picnic Sunday. All the Black Greek organizations got together.
On Father's Day?
On
No,
prior the
prior
week before.
Prior
Okay.
weekend.
The Sunday before.
The finality of it all is in Dan Ryan Woods. There was a picnic, and my best guesstimate was there had to be over 1,500
Yeah.
to 2,000 members of a variety of different fraternities and sororities out in Dan Ryan Woods. As he indicated, we participated in the walk. Our membership within Panhellenic Council here in Chicago requires us to have 3 members of our chapter participate on a monthly basis in the meetings and activities, planning, if you will, the Panhellenic activities throughout the Chicagoland area, as well as there's the current president requires that each chapter president participate and meet on a monthly, I think it's quarterly basis, to discuss those things within the Panhellenic Council that impact our individual chapters, as well as provide a forum for which the items within our individual chapters may have an impact, or we may need the participation of the Panhellenic Council.
Now in December, we had a conference, the Pan-Atlantic Council, and we talked about the fact that, okay, yeah, the alphas could do this, but wouldn't it be better if it was the alphas, kappas, Qs, iotas, and sigmas all working together? And we talked about that, the big picture. that this is bigger than any one organization, and that there's strength in numbers. That if we got together and worked together, we could get bigger and better things done. And that's what the Pan-Atlantic organization is all about. And it is big. And when you look at it on a national scene, each president or each head of whatever organization nationally, they sit on a board together to help, draft rules and, talk about how they want to get things done at the national level. So, that whole thing about, back in the old days, this Greek organization fighting the other Greek organization, that
Competing with.
that doesn't, the competition is friendly. Whatever competition that occurs, like for instance, see back in the day, it was step-offs. The Alphas would step against the Kappas, and we would do it at the Delta Derby. 2 weeks ago in the Dan Ryan Wolves, it was a stroll-off. They come out with the different strolls. The Megas have one, the Alphas have one, but it was all friendly. And even when we see each other on the street, hey, Frater, what's up? And we greet each other. So that animosity, that rivalry is not something you see a lot, because we know we're all the same, actually.
Right. And at the end of the day, when we all sit down and think about it, we're all about the same purpose, and that is providing a bigger impact for our young people to succeed.
You have chapters. This is an international organization.
Yes.
Each chapter has a president. Do you have a president of the presidents?
Yes.
Okay.
It's called a general president.
General president.
Our general president is Mark S. Tillman. Brother Tillman is someone that's bringing a whole lot to the fraternity. He's a real business-minded person, no nonsense business, and very focused. And he's good for the fraternity. It's good to keep us on track. And, all fraternities are dealing with issues, some kind of issue. I guess the elephant in the room is hazing. How do you manage hazing? And one of the things that Brother Tillman is very strong about, that's not going to be tolerated in any form or fashion at all. Brother Jiles just went through the process. There was no hazing. And it's been shown that because someone's hazed, that don't make them a better brother. And so it's good to have someone in like Brother Tillman that's really focused on issues like that, focus on how can we move the fraternity forward? How do we bring more of the college guys into the corporate world successfully? How do we get some of the guys that's alumni, how do we get them to own business and support them in their business efforts? And so this is what Brother Tillman is moving forward with.
How do you get the young people that participate in your programs? I don't mean to join the organization. I mean the people that you mentor, the people that you service. How do you find them?
Well, one, like, oftentimes they come from churches and school, but by far word of mouth. As we just stated, we had our banquet this past Saturday. It was a wonderful, excellent affair. And before I could walk out the room, parents that were guests of other parents walked up, how can I get my son and daughter, how do I get my son involved? That was the most often asked question. I want my son involved. I like that. There's other things. We talk about this Leadership Development Institute, but we try to take in the other potential students to do it. If anything, I think our problem is going to be that we have a capacity of between 25 and 30 kids, students. Come September, when we get ready to do Project Alpha, I'm sure we're going to have 40 kids knocking at the door saying, I want to get involved. So it's the word of mouth. We have a good reputation, and it's going on and on. It was good to see at the picnic students that have gone on, left our program, graduated from high schools and college, coming back still to want to support the program. So that's a good feel. So it's word of mouth, hearing about it in the schools. Project Alpha is real big because it's all over the place.
Starting at age about?
Well, we try to focus on the high school kids from 9th to 12th grade.
Okay.
But if you got a 7th or 8th grader that's serious, bring them on. I'm not going to turn them away.
Okay. All right. But we're not ready for girls yet.
Well, no. It's I think the sororities do such a great job,
What a cop-out.
I mean, I'm being realistic. I have a friend that's a Zeta, and she was involved with her mentoring program. And so I would love to have a project or two where, the
You
group.
did some cooperation with a sorority.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I would love to do
You
that.
don't have to take the girls in under your wing.
Well, and that's the whole idea. The thing I think, the program, you talk about etiquette, because that's come up in the conversation over and over again, that when we do the etiquette program, that we want to do it in conjunction with a sorority group, with the girls, so that the guys understand about the appropriate way to pull back the chair, the appropriate way to approach a lady. So.
And the other thing is,
You know,
that
we're running out of time, so I want you to be aware of that.
okay. The other thing I want to add to that is that from a male perspective, and especially when you're trying to mentor, we've discovered that there's a short amount of programs available to young African American men to one, help them get through the scholastic experience, as well as to help them with what we think to be common sense issues. For example, we talked about having the law enforcement folk come by, and just when you're interacting with the young men and you hear some of the things that they would have done had they not had the experience that they've shared with us, you sit back and you say, oh, okay.
Project Alpha is real big for that. That's the one we talk about the male responsibility. The questions that come up from there, the guys about how do young ladies get pregnant, or some of the things, the STDs, you get into some really, intense questions. Again, there's no such thing as a dumb question. If it's asked, in a sincere manner, we try to ask them that, answer, what's going on. So that's
Well, I have to tell you that we have come to the end of our time, but it certainly was informative. I learned a whole lot, and I meant to. So I just want to thank you again, Mr. Williams, Mr. Glass, Mr. Jiles from the Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity, for coming in and for helping us set the record straight on what it is that these fraternities are about. And certainly it's not just about prestige, it's about service, and that's a wonderful thing. We don't have it. They said the harvest is full, but the laborers are few. So it's good to see brothers at work in the community and putting a good face on us instead of seeing us on the 6 o'clock news always cast in some negative light. Thank you so much.